You were out early, and as you often are, you were bold about your opposition, about the stances you were going to take. Tell us why. Everyone's put a lot of words in your mouth. You tell us why.
Well, first of all, it was really important after the election to recognize that the American people sent a message they do want change. Now, we probably could have performed a little better in November if we had done a variety of things differently, in my opinion. But here we are. We have the House majority. The American people expect us to do what we said we would do. And given that we had a fairly thin majority, it was very clear that we needed to establish how this game is going to be played and make it very clear that we need to sit down at the table and advance conservative priorities. A few of my colleagues leaned into the fight with hardcore saying, look, we're opposing McCarthy. I raised a lot of questions saying, well, I need the leader to make clear what he's going to do to lead us forward. And we sent a memo out in early December, December 8th, where we outlined what we believe were the key areas that needed to be addressed by any speaker candidate. So we spent the last month almost exactly negotiating through those things. It took a while to get where we needed to go. Frankly, probably could have and should have been done before January 3rd. But sometimes it just takes the pressure of getting through the moment in order to get where you need to go. And look, we had a great week where the American people got to see 434 people in a chamber with people raising ideas and thoughts and differences of opinion and standing up for them. And I think that resonated. I think the American people saw that. And I think all the talking heads, there was like a 180-degree switch in the middle of last week by a lot of the talking heads who started the week going, oh, those knuckleheads, they're all in it for personal gain. And, then they started saying, wait a second, they're just trying to push for openness, open rules, be able to cut spending. They want to limit spending. That sounds a lot like why we actually sent them there. So crazy, we're with them.
Chip, will you please expand on limiting spending? Now, that's music to my ears. Just take a hacksaw to that whole thing, but explain what's getting cut, because I'm positive every low-T GOP loser in D.C. is talking about you taking away grandma's Social Security check right now.
Well, you're exactly right. It took approximately 0.2 seconds for everybody to be saying, you're going to slaughter defense, you're going to take away your ability to defend our country, and you're going to hurt Social Security and Medicare. Everybody calm down. Here's what we did. Number one, we changed the process so that we have to be able to see the rules for the bills that are produced for 72 hours. And we've got a rules committee, which is the one who decides how this stuff gets to the floor, that now has conservatives on it that can enforce those rules. We have single subject. We have germaneness. That all changes the tenor, so you can't pile a lot of stuff in there. But here's the important part. We required that we be able to offer amendments on the floor during the appropriations fight to cut spending. In other words, we would have an open rule process for cutting spending. That's been embraced. That's a big deal. We haven't done that for years. And then the final part, we got an agreement, and we talked to the speaker about this, about limiting spending, that we would cap spending at fiscal year 22 levels. Now, that's still an outrageously high level of spending, Jesse. But in order to balance the budget over 10 years, in order to get that accomplished and not undermine our ability to spend what we need for defense, we agreed to do an FY22 cap. That would be one of the biggest reductions in spending in history. And we would be, frankly, that would be an enormous win. But here's the key. You got to use the leverage points to do it. And that's when we get to the spending mechanism in September, or say in July, when we are going through June or July, the debt ceiling fight.
Leverage. It seems like someone else was just talking about that. All right. Now, explain this to me, Jim. Explain to me all the opposition towards it. Because when you lay things out, to hear you talk about that, a moderate spending cut, that's nothing scary or drastic. Certainly not what I know you would probably do if you were dictator. We're talking about single issue bills. We're talking about a term limit vote. We're talking about accountability for the FBI, which we'll get to in a second. Now, this is conservatism 101 for what people want today, and yet 90% of the GOP pundit class opposed you for the last week. Why?
Well, here's the thing. We laid out in very clear terms on December 8th that we wanted certain structural reforms. We were able to get a lot of those things adopted or agreed to, I should say. But there were the key things that mattered for substantive issues, spending, being able to fight for the border. So you're putting up the Texas border plan. We wanted to make sure we were going to advance the Texas border plan, which all but one members of the Republican delegation from Texas supported and got behind. because it actually focuses on security. We were able to mandate, hey, we need to end the COVID mandates. We wanted to make sure that we were going to get a term limits vote. There were things that we thought were really important that weren't a part of the commitment that needed to be put forward. But what we were able to do, I think, was show that there was a backlash from the swamp when you dare stand up and say, here are the things that need to be done. And then at the end of the day, we showed that we were able to win by taking it to the American people. That was on display when Mike Rogers and Matt Gaetz had a little bit of tension on Friday night. And look, I think Matt has handled that very well, and Mike too. Subsequently, they've on social media said, "Hey, we're going to work together." But that was, hey, the ones who are the insurgents pushing and saying we need change, and then the establishment, the order, the chairman saying, "No, we're not going to change." We need to do that. As I said yesterday on one of the shows, a little temporary conflict is really important in order to force the changes here, so the Republicans can do what we said we would do. I don't fear those conflicts. We wake up tomorrow and we all figure out how to work together because that's what we're paid to do. But damn it, I'm going to force that when it needs to be forced.
Amen. All right, finally, the FBI. This is my biggest issue because I believe what's happening right now with the administrative state will end this nation if it is not fixed. I love that we have some sort of accountability coming. What does it look like? What do we have? What don't we have?
Well, first of all, Jim Jordan is obviously an extraordinary chairman of the Judiciary Committee.
Yes.
Proud to serve on it. Proud to serve with him. What we've been striving for and pushing for an independent church-style committee is to elevate the extent to which we are saying that we need broad powers across the entirety of all of the various agencies. And then we decided ultimately in the end, rather than independently doing that, to marry it with the Judiciary Committee as a powerful select subcommittee where Jim would be able to be in charge of that from the top as the chairman. We're still figuring out how to structure that, and there's a number of ways to do that in terms of personnel. But it's really critically important that we go after the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, the intel agencies, all of the power brokers for what they've done. And here's the important part. Also, Fauci and all of those involved with NIH and CDC and the FDA, all of the decisions that they have made, absolutely abhorrent what they've done to the American people. And Jesse, you've been one of the ones leading on that, along with my good friend Steve Dace and some others, making clear that this is completely unacceptable. And we need to make sure that this weaponization of government, it's made clear it's not just the FBI. It's not just intelligence agencies. It's the whole apparatus of bureaucrats who are at war with the American people. And that needs to be made clear. That needs to be put on display. And then we need to lay out a roadmap on what we need to deal with it in terms of defunding or transforming these agencies.
The great Megyn Kelly, who needs no introduction. Nevertheless, she's a journalist, host of the Megyn Kelly Show, which is awesome. It's on SiriusXM Triumph Channel 111. That's 111 in my community college every weekday at noon Eastern Time. Can also be found at YouTube TV/Megyn Kelly, wherever you get your podcasts as well. Megyn, talked a little bit about the Biden documents. I don't know. I guess I'm not hopeful that anything's going to come of this.
No.
It is a big deal, but it's not going to get treated like a big deal. But am I wrong?
No, nothing's going to come of this. And it's so clear what they did here. They find the documents prior to the midterms and they keep it quiet so that they can set up their whole lane of defense before it breaks publicly, right? They talk to the attorney general, they get an investigation going just so that they don't look like they're being overly harsh on Trump. Oh, see, we do this whenever we find a former president or a sitting president has documents he shouldn't have in his off-campus facilities. This is, of course, that's why we got a U.S. attorney involved and we had the attorney general look into it, and he could very well be charged. You never know. The FBI took a... Oh, baloney. They know very well none of that is going to happen. And frankly, it shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen to Trump. It shouldn't happen to Biden. And the only reason they called Merrick Garland is because they want the fig leaf of looking like they're fair, and they just do this to everybody. That investigation is going to go nowhere. There will be no charges, even though we're told there were top secret documents in the Biden stash. And the Trump investigation will probably result in criminal charges, and they're just trying to make it look like they treated them both exactly the same.
Megyn, you're the smart person who went to college and you know all this legal stuff. So I have to ask, does it, I know the Biden stuff's going nowhere, but does it give Trump some legal cover that Biden was busted with some documents too? Does it give him any cover at all? Does it help him?
I mean, I think it helps him in the PR war. I'm not sure it helps him in the legal war, but it certainly helps him in the PR war because the average American can understand they both did it and they only went after the one guy. That's the bottom line for a lot of people. And I recognize there are differences. Trump did all the things he did. We understand that these two situations are not exactly the same. But let's face it, the only reason the Biden lawyers probably raised this as an issue when they found these docs was because of the Trump issue. I mean, what would happen if we went through Jimmy Carter's files? What would happen if we went through Barack Obama's files? Bill Clinton, never mind. You're going to find a ton of this stuff. Typically, presidents manage to have a few documents that they probably shouldn't otherwise have in their files, and we've never gone after them criminally. And look, I know that the mainstream press is like, but Trump had nuclear secrets. Well, that hasn't been proven. That hasn't been proven at all. In fact, some of the latest reporting on the Trump thing is like he liked tchotchkes. That's probably why he kept maybe the Kim Jong-un note to him. Did it really compromise national security? That has yet to be proven in any place that I would trust, like not from Maggie Haberman at the New York Times. I'll believe it when I see it in a court of law. But the point is, they're not treating him the same as they've treated the others. And this fig leaf on the Biden situation doesn't change that.
The Bill Clinton files. Better wear some rubber gloves for that one. All right, you know what? Let's talk about the timing of all this. Joe Biden, he's prepping for a 2024 run. I can't believe I'm actually saying that out loud. He's apparently prepping for a 2024 run. They're clearly flirting heavily, the Democratic Party is, with Gavin Newsom. They're dancing, their hand is on his butt, but Joe Biden's saying he's going to run. What am I supposed to make of the Democrat primary in 2024?
I think the Democrats feel energized by those midterms and actually think that this, man who's really struggling with his cognitive abilities can nonetheless, if he can't actually do the job, he could re-win the job. And they are going to stick with the one that brung him. I think that's kind of the thinking, because these same people in that Hill article and other places are saying, I didn't believe he could do it before, but now I do. I was a doubter, but now I'm a believer. But they're totally discounting the whole line of concern when it comes to his mental function. I mean, Jesse, just this morning we were talking about on my show when he went down to the border for his 2 minutes, he managed to commit another gaffe. He met somebody from the Salvation Army. You saw from the Salvation Army, and started saying like, I spent time with the Secret Service over in Ukraine. What? Then he corrected himself and changed it to Salvation Army. So unclear whether, he misspoke or he was genuinely confused, but the Salvation Army plays the music on the corners at Christmas time and you donate to help, but they don't protect you. It's like, he was one step away from asking them, the guy, how many Taliban kills he had. It was like, hello.
Megyn, I understand that it's tough. You got to dance with the one who brought you, as you pointed out, but have they considered that Kamala Harris is the successor? Joe Biden is a very old man, and I don't wish any physical harm on him whatsoever, but he's an old man, not doing well, going to run him another 4 years. What happens if, God forbid, they have to cart the man out the back of the White House and she has to take over? Isn't that disaster for a party to have somebody that unlikable as the face of the party?
Yeah. I mean, I think what we've seen when it comes to these elections and maneuvering and so on is the Democrats may be objectionable and outrageous in some of their policies, but they're not dumb. Like they're pretty savvy in their strategy in a way I think a lot of people wish the Republicans would be a lot of the time, right? Like they pulled off those midterms by making it abortion, Trump, all the stuff. So they know she can't win. They know this, which is yet another reason why it's like new life in the Biden sails. Oh, they don't care if they have to weaken and Bernie him over the line a second time or he's got to go back down in the basement. They know they can't win with her and they know they can't bounce her, given their commitment to identity politics. So, and certainly not for like the white man out of California, Gavin Newsom. So they need Biden to be their guy this just until they get over the finish line for the second term. And whatever happens from that point is somebody else's problem. I'm sure they'd love to see her subbed out.
Yeah, then they'll figure it out from there. All right, Megyn, finally, the Republican side. It has been thought, I know you've said this on your great show, that Donald Trump is the presumptive nominee. For the longest time, I just thought Donald Trump was the presumptive nominee. I don't know if I believe that anymore, and I'm going to ask his son about that coming up next. I don't know if I believe that anymore. There have been missteps. He seems a little maybe out of touch, and whatever you say about Donald Trump, out of touch is not something that I would have called him ever. But am I crazy? What am I seeing right now?
I still think he's the presumptive nominee. It's not to say he's, 100% going to get it, but I'd certainly put the money on him over anybody else right now, including DeSantis. And that's not to say that DeSantis isn't necessarily going to be the standard bearer of the Republican Party, but right now it's still Trump. He's a former president. It's tough to match that, whether you're a Dem or a Republican. He's a former president who can still run and says he is running. And by the time he left office, had huge support from the Republican Party. Yes, he hurt himself with the January 6th stuff and since then, but most Republicans also believe the election was stolen from him. But, his inability to focus on them as opposed to himself, I think, is hampering him somewhat. But that's not to say when he actually goes full Trump on DeSantis or anybody else in a primary, they're not going to immediately fall right back in love with him and get back on board. So I still think the smart money's on him. I think DeSantis will probably be the Republican nominee, if not this time, then someday. But I don't think with Trump in the race, it's this time around.
Megyn Kelly, you're the best.
When you saw the photograph of the top secret documents laid out on the floor at Mar-a-Lago, what did you think to yourself, looking at that image?
How that could possibly happen, how anyone could be that irresponsible. And I thought, what data was in there that may compromise sources and methods? By that I mean names of people who helped, or et cetera. And it's just totally irresponsible.
He's so old and tired. Joining me now, Donald Trump Jr., host of the news show Triggered with Don Jr., only on Rumble. I'm going to ask him about that here in a minute. That's freaking cool. What a score for Rumble. But first, all right, Don. Well, boy, I can't imagine anything more irresponsible than having classified documents you're not supposed to have as president. It's not like every president in the world does this, but Joe Biden thinks that's very irresponsible.
Well, apparently it's very irresponsible, and Joe Biden himself now did it. Should shock no one. I mean, it seems like it's a page right out of the communist playbook, right, Jesse? It's like accuse others of doing all the things that you're doing. I mean, how many more times do we have to see this? But what I'm really wondering, Jesse, is I haven't seen it yet. And you would think there would be reports of the FBI's hostage rescue team, the team that helped to raid Mar-a-Lago. You'd think they'd be involved with this because apparently they've now been elevated to this level of prosecution in looking into these things. But I haven't seen the reports yet. It must be underway and kept quiet because I'm wondering when that's going to happen.
Yes, I'm sure. And make sure you notify CNN before you bring the HRT in to kick indoors to make sure your political opponents look as bad as humanly possible. Okay, this actually leads me into something that is very serious and very sad. The justice system in this country, doesn't matter what people think about it one way or the other, I can't stand it, but half the country doesn't trust it, at least. And it might be more than that.
I don't know that anyone trusts it at this point. I just think that 50% are fine with it because they understand that there's a different level of justice for them. The notion of the Democrats, right? You see what's going on with Trump and or Biden. You look at Hunter Biden versus me. Look at what they did to me with literally nothing out there. And yet I've done countless hours before congressional committees, Senate committees for treason, Jesse. A minor detail, given that it's a crime punishable by death. But Hunter Biden can take millions from Russian oligarchs. He can launder money linked to human trafficking rings. He can get no-show job payments for Ukraine while his father's in positions of power there. And we are told by even the highest levels of authority in our intelligence community that it's Russian disinformation for 2 years until it isn't, and then it's forgotten as though it's no longer relevant. So there is a two-tiered justice system in this country. If anyone doesn't believe that at this point, and even some people I know who are, let's call it, left-leaning but not insane, are just now starting to understand exactly how bad that is.
By the way, I wanted to ask you about that. You have been investigated endlessly, and you keep coming up so clean. It's a little bit concerning. You were never tempted to commit even tiny crimes? What's wrong with you? I'm a little disappointed.
Well, I'm looking now at the Hunter stuff. If I had known this stuff then, that would have been like a hall pass to do whatever the hell I wanted to for like a 4-year period. Because apparently, if you're the son of the president of the United States, you can do all of these things. Luckily, crack was never my thing. I guess don't knock it till you've tried it. But I've avoided that. But that's, again, that's not the narrative that you see. People will watch this interview and the leftists will say that I was clearly high on something. Ignoring the fact that the actual president of the United States' son is on video doing these things. So what I want to know is, like, what are the things that Hunter Biden chose Jesse not to put on video? Like when he was sitting there being like, you know what, like maybe this is too far. I won't film it anymore. It'd be interesting to know.
You have a new show on Rumble, and I'll tell you, I forget when I saw it. It was a week ago, maybe. I don't remember exact time frame. And I looking at my phone, checking out the news of the day, and I saw that, and I thought, dang, Rumble, that is a huge score. Where'd this whole deal come from? How'd this come about?
Well, it's interesting. Chris Pavlovsky is the CEO of Rumble, way before they went even public. I've been sort of on the leading edge of this sort of free speech movement. I've been the guy. I've been talking about censorship for 6 years before it was cool to talk about online censorship, just because I had such a big platform and I saw what they were doing every day. I was one of the people they called a conspiracy theory when they say, well, I'd ask the question, how do you go from like 10,000 retweets to 4 in a day? And, I'm clearly on a list, and, I was called all sorts of names. And so I've been a big proponent early on of all of these free speech platforms and, competitors to what I've seen, as big tech, whether it's Google, big tech, social media platforms that have really gone so far out of their way. Let's make no mistake. What was going on at Twitter, and we now know that happened at Twitter, you're telling me that wasn't also and still isn't going on at Facebook and the other places and Google, and by the way, and probably in every mainstream newsroom in America. That bias has existed there. I've been calling it out for so long. So I think I was like the second verified, like sort of personality, just uploading some of my short form content onto Rumble. I was an early guy trying to help them out and get a foothold. And now that, again, some of this stuff is out there, maybe Twitter's gone around the corner a little bit for now, but not in terms of video platform. YouTube is still a disaster. I'm sure you've probably experienced that. And, certainly many of our friends in the conservative movement who are willing to say the stuff that is true and that was willing to talk about the conspiracy theories that all end up being 100% right about 100% of the time within about a 6-month period. I was that guy. And I just said, you know what, as long as mainstream media is going to continue to do that, we need voices to be out there. And I'm going to help the outlets, whether they're sort of, the red state economy businesses or even just free speech platforms. There's going to be plenty of left-leaning people on Rumble too, because that's what we're supposed to have in a democracy and in a republic. We're supposed to have that debate, not have a one-sided conversation. And so I'm just excited to get on there. I believe that we need that to help our country, and hopefully people like what I have to say.
It's funny that you brought up getting suspended from YouTube, because I get our entire network suspended basically routinely. I know you're going to find that shocking. And it's something that we've all been shocked by. Yes, I know. We've all been shocked by how powerful they are and how much of a daunting task it is to create an alternate economy, because we very clearly do have to create some sort of a parallel economy, and some of those efforts have been crushed. But are we getting smarter and better? Are we building one now, or are we still so far behind that we're just a million miles away from freedom?
Well, listen, I think we're far behind, but people are now onto it, right? For so long, conservatives, you do a great job of this on social and Twitter and everywhere where you're talking about like, hey, we got to be engaged in this battle. I think I try to fight that same fight, which is like, we can no longer do I'm going to turn the other cheek and I hope they're going to do the right thing. And I think, no, but for a long time, it was, I was going to do a book like 2 years ago, right after my last one, I was going to do a book on cancel culture, but I was like, man, there's no happy ending here because we're getting our ass kicked. And yet now you look at what's going on. Look at Netflix stock price, because, there wasn't the, trans Asian at the signing of the Declaration of Independence in the Netflix recreation. Like, people have said enough. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, just like creating a story that doesn't exist to satisfy woke components of society. Disney stock is half price because they're jamming their stuff. No one cares about, if someone's LGBT now, it doesn't even, I don't even know anyone that bothers. What we don't want is the narrative just jammed down our throat constantly, where you got to force feed it to young children, and they can't get a pack of cigarettes for another 15 years, but we're going to allow them to chop off their genitals to conform to their woke teachers' desires. Like, people have had enough. So I think with a Rumble, there's a someone's taking on it. I think with Truth Social, I think honestly Elon Musk so far at Twitter. Let's see how that plays off. But I like it. I see a different level of engagement there. People are looking for that, and I think then on the business side, the same thing's happening. People are taking the time rather than just going to Google and finding what the Bolsheviks would want you to find when you're searching for something. They're saying woke corporate and the policies and the things that they're funding. They're waking up to that. There's guys like Michael Seifert at Public Square, who's putting out an app where people can find businesses that have conservative values and they believe in the stuff that you believe. And guess what? You're going to search on Google or you search on their app. It takes the same amount of time, but you can put your money and vote with your wallet and put someone who believes in the stuff that you do, put their kid through hockey practice or whatever it may be. I think people now are so fed up. They're so sick of it. The left has gone so far with the insanity that people are going to go out of their way and they're going to find these other things. So I'm a huge believer in that movement. I think it'll be a big part of what I talk about on the show and Rumble as these things emerge. And there's going to be plenty emerge that don't work, right? But when you find someone who's doing something really cool that has sort of the brain power and the capital to get it going, I think we're going to give these guys a run for their money. And it's a daunting task, man. We are up against a lot. These people, as you know, and I think you've probably said it the same way as I have, they would put us in the gulags. But the fact that they would, and the fact that they're not even pretending that they won't anymore, people are like, yeah, maybe I won't give my hard-earned dollars to Starbucks, or maybe I'll just go find the coffee shop that believes what I believe in and vote accordingly. And I used to be, as a business guy, we were in hotels and real estate. I wanted to appease 360 million Americans and another 6 billion people around the world. Guess what? We'll do just fine, catering to 160 million Americans that actually believe this stuff. And I promise you, there's independents that are watching and saying, you know what, it's gone too far. Other people are going to glom onto this. It's about helping that small business, not corporate America. It's about understanding where your money then goes in the economy. And honestly, I don't know that there's anything more important.
Where can people get this show? The show is Triggered. He's Don Jr. Obviously, you know who he is. How do people get it? How much does it cost? Where do we find this thing?
Well, there's a couple components to it. There's going to be sort of a live component. What Rumble did really unique is they worked with Dave Rubin and integrated the Locals platform. So there's actually going to be a component that you can flip onto on the subscription thing where you can interact and go live back and forth with me, where it's not just listening to me be a talking head for an hour, but where I'm seeing, what you're putting up there. I'm answering your questions and interacting live, whether it's with me or whether it's with a guest. What's really sort of cool about the platform is, and I've known Chris for so long and been working with him, he's like, hey man, do what you want. Let's see what works and we'll go from there. So I think we have some flexibility, and I look forward to sort of the feedback from the people. That's what I've been doing this for. For me, it's about making sure that voice of mainstream America gets heard. And I understand that's perhaps ironic given where I'm coming from. But again, if I cared that much about comfort, it would have been a lot easier to be a real estate developer from New York City and to shut the hell up. But I decided to engage.
No, I would say you and your father have both given that normal guy a voice. Credit to both of you. Don, please come back soon. Appreciate you, brother. I can't help but notice something with this whole Biden files thing. You see, we talked to Megyn Kelly about it yesterday, and what we know is the Biden files had info about United Kingdom. Okay, so UK. Had info on Iran. All right. Also had info on Ukraine. Now, I think that raises some questions that we should demand answers to. Not because it would be unique for the president to have information on Ukraine. After all, there's a big war going on there now. We're sending billions of American dollars to that war. It's not that. We should demand some answers to these questions because of Joe Biden's deep ties to Ukraine. And I realize he's been coached by this point in time on what to say about the whole thing.
4 years after being vice president, I was a professor at Penn. They found some documents in a box locked cabinet, or at least a closet. And as soon as they did, they realized there were several classified documents in that box. And they did what they should have done. They immediately called the archives, turned them over to the archives, and I was briefed about this discovery and surprised to learn that there were any government records that were taken there to that office. But I don't know what's in the documents.
I love that. I was surprised to learn that there were any documents taken there to that office. just being honest. Just speaking off the cuff, Joe. Okay, but let's circle back to this. Hunter Biden. I know we know this, but we have to bring this up again. Hunter Biden sat on the board. You know anybody who sits on a board? Let me tell you a little something about it, because I know a guy, actually I know a couple guys, who either are on boards or their wives are on boards. And this is how it generally works. One of them, well, I'm not going to go into the details of it, but this is how it works for his wife. You see, his wife, she got appointed to sit on a board of this major company. And I was just curious, what does that look like? I don't sit on any boards. I know you're going to find that shocking, but I'm not welcome in the boardrooms. I don't sit on any boards. But okay, so what does it look like? You sit on a board. Well, you know what it looks like for her? This is just one situation. I'm sure it can vary quite a bit, but I've heard similar stories. You know what she has to do? 4 times a year. Once every quarter, she has to go to a meeting. Oftentimes, that meeting is a retreat. Now, you should know that we're talking first-class travel, 5-star resorts. A retreat being you go to some luxury resort for a week out in Las Vegas or in Aspen or something like that. Of course, fly first-class private jet sometimes. 4 times a year she has to do this. She goes and sits down for a few days, a week long, all expenses paid, by the way, food, drinks, everything. And she has to go into some meetings, okay? So sounds like pretty light duty, right? $250,000 a year. $250,000 a year this woman gets paid for 4 trips, 4 meetings a year. Sometimes it's not a trip, actually. Sometimes they just meet in the fancy boardrooms here. But again, not exactly heavy lifting. That's what sitting on a board is. Lots of times, that's what it is. Joe Biden's son, is a lifelong drug addict, a complete disaster of a human being. And not only is he a disaster of a human being, Hunter Biden has no experience in the energy sector and the gas industry whatsoever. So in that horribly corrupt country, Ukraine, we were just discussing, when a corrupt company, it's known to be corrupt, Burisma, hires Hunter Biden on for $83,000 a month. Again, not heard of, that's what they do, with no experience whatsoever. You, the American citizen, are obligated to ask, why? And then we have the latest revelation here, because remember, Joe Biden had a prosecutor fired. He admitted it on camera. He fired a prosecutor, actually bragged about it on camera, fired a prosecutor who was looking into Burisma, that company his son worked for. He did that while he was vice president. And now Joe Biden has documents related to Ukraine in a private office where he's not supposed to have these documents. And I think it's perfectly acceptable. In fact, I think it's something we should do to ask, what were these documents about? What's going on there? There's enough ugly connections between the Biden family and Ukraine to ask that question. And I am thrilled to see the Republican-controlled Congress has already signaled that they intend to investigate this whole thing. And let me clarify something for you. Speaking of the Republican-controlled Congress and investigations and impeachments, we'll get to that in a second and things like that. You're going to be seeing a ton of that now. Investigation after investigation after investigation. And I want to caution you against something. If you're a normal person, which you probably are, if you're a normal person and you miss the country you used to have, you miss living in a relatively normal place, and and you really just want everything to work the way it used to work, and you kind of want everything to calm down. There's too much noise out there. Everything just calm down. When Republicans start doing all these investigations, you may be tempted. You may be sucked into the whole, no more investigations, guys. That's what Democrats do. Let's just legislate. I just want to no more wasting time. And let me caution you on something. Yes, lots of these investigations will tangibly be a waste of time. There's a Democrat Senate, there's a Democrat president, or a Democrat DOJ. Are these things going to go anywhere? No. But it is really, really, really important that we cease being the Bill Barr, there won't be a tit for tat party, and we have to be a you did it to me, so now I'm going to do it to you party. That's not some childish thing. Oh, we shouldn't be that guy. We want to be above all that. No. If we want these people to stop weaponizing the government, stop investigating every single Republican we can find, if we want these people to stop using every ounce of power they have to attack their political opponents, then we have to respond in kind. Because again, you're not dealing with Democrats, with liberals, with lefties. You're dealing with communists. You're dealing with people who only understand fear and pain. That's all communists have ever understood. These people, none of them, they're never going to wake up one day ever and say, guys, we've taken this investigation stuff too far. It's gone too far. Look, I don't feel right. We got to back off. They're never going to have that moment. The only chance you have at ever getting them to stop doing what they do is for them to wake up and say, oh gosh, now they're doing it to us. Hey man, maybe we shouldn't do this again next time because I don't want to be investigated. Hey, let's back off here because they're gonna do it to us. That's your only chance to stop them. And remember, they're not done with Donald Trump yet, speaking of all this stuff. You hear him on MSNBC?
So I don't know if this is the end of the beginning or the beginning of the end, but I think we're going to enter a new phase where we will see criminal charges out of Georgia with respect to the former president on this aspect of what he did to overthrow the will of the people.
I've been warning you about that for quite some time. I actually agree with that idiot there. I think we will see criminal charges, if not out of Georgia, then federally or both. The communist is not going to back off on things like that until we make him feel fear and pain.
Support the First TV today and get instant access to exclusive specials like Who is Ron DeSantis, The History of FBI Scandals, and America's Worst Presidents. Visit thefirsttv.com/support or download the First TV app to become a supporter and start watching today.